The fake snow still clung to the edges of the holiday card when I saw it, my son, his wife, and my granddaughter smiling in front of my old fireplace. As I held the photo, cocoa mugs and matching sweaters blurred while their silence toward me stayed perfectly crisp. While the smell of pine and cinnamon leaked from the envelope, I remembered the stitches in that red sweater I knit her. The same house I gave them during surgery, temporarily, Craig had said, was now listed without my name. That's when I opened the deed copy buried in my glovebox, the one that still had my initials untouched. So I bought back the house they tried to sell from under me and changed the locks before they got home. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. I almost didn't open the envelope. One of those glossy photo cards, thick paper, metallic lettering, probably from a printer Melissa found on sale. The return address was theirs, Craig and Melissa Mayer and Emily, with a little snowflake beside it. Inside was a photo of my family, or what used to be my family. They were all standing in front of my old fireplace, the brick one Craig helped me paint white the summer he turned 14. Emily was wearing the red sweater I knit her 2 winters ago, and Melissa had arranged everything just so, matching plaids, cocoa mugs, string lights in the background. Even the dog looked choreographed. They were smiling like they'd never had a silence between them. But there I was. No signature, no note, no wish you were here. Just a perfect picture inside the house I had made a home for 37 years, now owned by my son and daughter-in-law, or about to be. I stared at that photo longer than I should have. My hands didn't tremble, they don't, not anymore. There's a strange calm that comes with being forgotten often enough. The first year stings, the third hurts. By the 6th, you learn to open envelopes like you're reading someone else's mail. It's been 6 years since they invited me to anything, no Thanksgiving, no birthdays, not even Emily's middle school graduation, and yet I've never missed a card, a gift, a message. It's always been a one-way devotion, the kind mothers don't get trophies for. I remember the first time they left me out, it was Craig on the phone. We're just keeping it small this year, Melissa's mom is flying in and you know the space. That was the beginning of just this year, which turned into every year. Carla showed up around noon with a container of homemade soup. She always brings soup when she knows I won't eat otherwise. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just looked at the photo on the counter and said, "Looks like a stock image for passive-aggressive living." Then she reached for the fridge magnet and stuck it up like it didn't hurt, like it didn't confirm everything I've been afraid of saying out loud. "You're not in it," she said, softer this time. "No," I answered, "I don't think I ever was." Later that evening, after she left and the sun dipped below the hedge line, I opened my laptop. I don't know what I was looking for, maybe a sign or some legal record, or maybe just a way to make it real. And there it was. The house, my house, the one I signed over to Craig temporarily after my surgery, the one he promised was still mine in all the ways that mattered. Listed. Active. Under C. Mayer and M. Mayer. There were 28 photos, wide-angle shots of the kitchen I renovated after my husband passed, the crown molding I saved up for, the pantry where I used to tape up Emily's scribbles. The listing language was so clean it cut: charming legacy property with plenty of potential, move-in ready, motivated sellers. I wasn't even a ghost in those pictures. No trace of me, no acknowledgement that everything inside those walls had once come from my hands. Not even a nod to the woman who'd kept that house breathing through grief and arthritis and years of pretending she wasn't angry. I sat back in the chair, my mouth didn't open, there wasn't anything left to say. I didn't cry, that's the thing people expect in stories like this, but crying is a kind of hope, isn't it? The belief that someone might hear you, feel guilty, change. Instead, I opened a fresh browser tab. Then I typed 2 words I hadn't allowed myself to search in years. Estate attorney. The message came in just after 5, a group text I wasn't supposed to see. Hope everyone had a great meal, so thankful for this family, love you all, read. Sent by Melissa. Of course, I'd forgotten I was still in the family thread, though muted for years, probably a mistake, probably a reminder. They included a photo too, the table lit by candlelight, cloth napkins folded into little shapes, one of those ridiculous Pinterest turkeys made out of cheese and crackers. I counted the place settings, 7, none for me. I didn't reply, I just stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering over the leave conversation option, but I didn't leave, not yet. The light was already fading outside and I hadn't opened the curtains all day. I wasn't hungry, hadn't been for most of the week. It wasn't sadness exactly, more like the absence of appetite, the kind of emptiness that had nothing to do with food. So I put on my coat and walked. There's something about late autumn in Pennsylvania that makes everything feel like it's bracing for something. Trees stripped down to their bones, air sharp enough to keep your thoughts clear. My boots crunched over the last of the leaves as I turned onto Sycamore Lane. Their lights were on, every window glowing. I stopped half a block away behind the same hedges I used to trim every other Saturday. Melissa was standing in the dining room refilling someone's wine. Craig was at the head of the table laughing. His laugh used to be deep and easy. Now it was clipped, self-conscious. He always laughed harder when Melissa was watching. Emily was there too, hair longer than I remembered, head tilted slightly down like she didn't want to be in the photo Melissa was trying to take. I didn't linger, just long enough to see it was real. When I got back, Carla was already waiting in her car out front. She didn't call first, she just knows that's how it's always been. "Come in," I said, "I don't have coffee made." "You think I'm here for coffee?" she said, brushing past me and setting a foil-wrapped bundle on the counter. "Brought you a plate, stuffing, no onions, I know how your stomach is." I didn't say anything, just sat, let the silence drape over the kitchen like a shawl. "They had a meal," I said finally, "a whole one, the kind I used to make." "They had a performance," she said, unwrapping the plate. "There's a difference." She slid the food in front of me, but I just looked at it. "It's not about the meal," I said, "it's being erased from the habit of being missed." Carla rested her elbows on the table. "They're not family, Helen, they're opportunists in matching sweaters." I almost laughed, not quite, but close. There was something in her tone that unlocked a box I hadn't opened in years. I rose, moved slowly into the guest room, the one I never bothered decorating, and pulled out the cedar chest I kept under the bed. The hinges creaked. Everything smelled like lavender and thyme. Inside, folded between old scarves and a pair of my husband's cufflinks, was the envelope I'd nearly forgotten. Handwritten, faded. His will. Not the official one, that had been drawn up after he retired, sterile, typed, proper, but this one came first. I remembered him writing it at the kitchen table after his first heart scare, long before Melissa joined the picture. He said, "If anything happens, you'll have this, just in case." The ink had bled slightly at the edges. My name was there in his handwriting, so was the house. He called it Helen's Place for as long as she wants to walk those floors. But it wasn't notarized, it wouldn't stand in court, it wouldn't matter. I folded it slowly, carefully, then I placed it beside the soup Carla had brought. Somehow that felt right. "What is it?" she asked. Proof of what he meant, even if they erased it. She watched me closely. "So what now?" I looked at the front door, then at my laptop still open on the dining table, the estate attorney search results waiting. "They want to move on with their lives," I said. "Let's help them hurry." I didn't expect to feel relief when I walked into Victor Ramos' office. Not relief, exactly, more like an acknowledgement of what was already happening, like stepping into a room after you've already made the decision to leave. The office was small, tucked between a pharmacy and a nail salon in a strip mall on the edge of town. There were no windows, but the faint smell of printer ink and lemon cleaner told me he spent more time here than anywhere else. Victor didn't stand when I entered. He simply nodded and motioned toward the chair across from his desk, as if he'd been waiting for me to walk in the door for months. The man was in his 50s, tight-lipped, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who carried their professionalism like a shield, even when the world behind them was unraveling. "Ms. Mayer," he said, his voice low and precise, "I've reviewed your case, let's get straight to the point." Craig triggered an old family trust clause claiming you no longer reside at the house. He didn't say it with any judgment, but I heard the weight in those words. They'd pushed me out, they de-manipulated the situation. I sat back in the chair, feeling the cold press of leather against my back. I never moved, not really. No, Victor agreed, but Melissa used your temporary relocation after surgery as a loophole. She argued you'd abandon the property. The room seemed to shrink as the full weight of their trail settled in. Melissa's smile had been so tight every time I'd visited after the surgery, always too careful, like she was already laying the groundwork for this. Craig never questioned it, he just followed. Victor pulled a file from his desk drawer and set it in front of me. You still have legal standing, he said, but time's ticking. Your son and daughter-in-law are making moves. They've already listed the house. They're trying to push you out before you can respond. I didn't answer immediately. I just looked at the file in front of me, the ink, the signatures, everything so final, so determined. They'll do whatever they can to take it, Victor continued, his voice turning sharper, more urgent. We need to be proactive, gather evidence, anything that proves your ongoing connection to the property. I thought of my old house, the one I had kept alive with every thread of my being. It wasn't just bricks and wood. It was my husband's laugh in the kitchen, my mother's old rocking chair in the corner, the smell of vanilla candles on quiet Sunday afternoons. That was my home, and now they wanted it. I have some receipts, utility bills, photos. I started. Carla had been helping me gather what we needed even before I knew where this would go. Victor nodded. Anything you can get me, the more the better. We need to prove you're still connected. I thought of the photos, the ones of the house when we first moved in before the years had weathered it. Of my husband and I standing side by side with a box of old tools in the living room. Of Craig, still a teenager, standing in front of the kitchen window looking out at the backyard. There was a moment, just a second, where it all hit me again, how much I had given. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small, worn envelope, the one I had been carrying since I'd found it again. My husband's handwritten will, the one he'd given me long before the legal one, promising me the house for as long as I lived. His words, in faded ink, Helen's place as long as she walks those floors. Victor glanced at it, then back at me as if he'd already guessed its significance. It won't hold in court, he said quietly, almost apologetically. Not without a notarized document, but it tells me something else. I looked at him, not quite understanding. You trusted Craig, he said simply. You gave him $25,000, you believed he would protect you and you trusted he would protect what was yours, but you've been slowly erased. They've moved in and now they're trying to take it. The words felt like a slap, but they were the truth. I'd given him the money without hesitation, believing I was helping my son, my only son. I trusted him to be there to take care of me when my health faltered, to keep my place in the world. But now I saw it, the money wasn't just a gift, it was the first step toward something else, a calculated move not by me but by them. They had been planning this for years. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight settle deep in my chest. Victor's eyes softened just for a moment. This won't be easy, but you've got the truth on your side. Let's take the fight to them. As I walked out of the office, I felt something shift. The heavy uncertainty I'd been carrying for years now had a name. The house, the betrayal, the lies, they were all part of the same game. It was time to play. It was Carla who heard about it first. The whispers always circle, even when you think they've forgotten you. They're hosting one last Christmas before renovations, she said with a bitterness that didn't need explanation. In your house, Helen. I didn't need to ask who'd made the decision. I'd been erased from their plans long ago. No one called me. No one bothered to ask if I wanted to come or if I would have liked to have been included in what was now, according to them, the final holiday in the place I built. I didn't let it bother me though, at least not outwardly. That evening, when the cold moonlight cut across the living room, I found myself sitting in my favorite chair, the one my husband had picked out when we'd moved into the house. It had been his once, then it became ours, and now it was mine again. As I sipped my tea, my phone buzzed in my lap, a message from Emily. I wish you were here. It was brief, a touch, but it cut through the numbness that had been settling in, the one I'd been so careful to craft around my heart. I knew what she meant. She didn't need to say anything more. Emily had always been the sensitive one. I remembered how she used to curl up next to me with her little book of stories, the one I'd read to her from my old chair by the window. I typed back as gently as I could, "It's okay, I'm exactly where I belong." I don't know if she understood, or maybe she did. Either way, I wasn't going to force her to choose between them and me. She didn't need that pressure, not yet. But Carla was another story. She wasn't letting me sit in silence. They think they've won, she said that night after I put the phone down. They think they've pushed you into a corner. They have, I replied quietly, looking at the empty chair where Craig used to sit during family dinners. You're not powerless, Carla insisted. You're quiet, there's a difference, let's change that. I didn't respond at first. I didn't know what to say. It wasn't about power or force. It was about making the right move, the move. I had to make it count. The next morning, Carla came over early, her car parked in the driveway like it always had. She brought a box with her. I didn't ask what was in it. I knew by now that Carla had a way of seeing what others missed. This is where you start, she said, setting the box on the kitchen counter. Inside, there were papers, receipts, bills, photos, utility statements, everything I needed to show that I was still connected to the house, that I still had a claim. But I knew it wasn't just about the paperwork, it was about something else, something deeper. Let's get you the money, Carla said, pointing to a new folder, the one with Victor's name written in bold. I'm not asking for a loan, I said, pushing the papers aside. I have it, I've been saving for years. Your retirement savings, she asked. I nodded, feeling the weight of what it meant. The money wasn't just numbers in an account, it was everything I had left. The years of sacrifice, the things I'd gone without, the small, quiet choices I'd made to build something, even when no one cared enough to notice. But now I was going to use it, to take back what was mine, to take back the house, and everything it stood for. Victor can match the offer, Carla said, tapping the folder. That'll be enough, the house will be yours again, but you need to be ready, this won't be clean, it's not just about the house, it's about claiming your place again. I know, I said, I know. I spent the rest of the afternoon going through the letters my husband had written me over the years, the ones I'd tucked away for so long, his reminders, his promises. This is your place, Helen, as long as you walk these floors, this is your home. The words felt heavier now, as if they had been written in anticipation of something. I was ready for that something, I had to be. I placed the last letter back in the drawer, taking a deep breath as I stood up. The house, my house, was still mine, I hadn't lost it yet. But soon I would have to fight for it. I walked to the window, looking out at the driveway. The streetlight flickered, casting long shadows over the yard. In my mind, I could already see the for sale sign hanging in front of the house, the one that Craig and Melissa had put up. Not for long. It wasn't enough to just match their offer, I needed to make a statement, and so I did what I hadn't done in years, I acted quickly. The offer sat on my desk, a piece of paper that might as well have been a threat. Craig and Melissa had made their move, the house listed for a price that was a joke in my eyes. It was my home and they wanted to flip it for their own gain, turning my memories into profit. So I matched it and then I raised them, a counterbid higher and in cash. Carla had advised me to take this route. If they're trying to take it from you, let them see what it feels like when you're the one controlling the board, she'd said with that dry confidence of hers. Victor was already pulling the strings behind the scenes. He de-arranged the paperwork, and with the surviving spouse clause, my legal right to the property was undeniable. They didn't stand a chance, but Craig and Melissa were too blinded by greed to see it coming. The day their offer was rejected, Carla called me first thing in the morning. Her voice was too quiet, too sharp. They're coming in to sign the papers today, it's done, but they don't know yet. I held the phone between my shoulder and ear, staring out the window at the quiet suburban street. Everything felt oddly still, as if the neighborhood were holding its breath. They don't know, I repeated softly, letting the words settle on my tongue. Not yet, Carla said, it's yours, Helen. I'd seen Craig's face at the dinner table enough times to know how to read him. I knew how his jaw would tighten when things didn't go his way, how he would look for someone to blame. Melissa would be the same, sharp, calculating, always a few steps ahead but never quite prepared for the unexpected. That afternoon, I arrived at the office with Carla, waiting in the corner while the paperwork was finalized. Everything had been coordinated. The title transfer, the bank statements, everything was ready to go. All that was left was Craig. Victor handed me the final documents, and with a glance to Carla, I tucked them under my arm. It was all set. Then, as expected, Craig appeared at the door. He was alone, probably assuming everything would go smoothly. His suit was slightly askew, like he hadn't taken the time to fix it after a rushed morning. His eyes darted around the room, searching for anything out of place. "Where's Melissa?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Busy," Craig replied tersely. "You know, real estate stuff." He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He had come to sign. He hadn't expected me to be here. The moment was almost surreal. The man who had taken everything from me, my dignity, my family, was standing right there, ready to claim the last piece of what I had left. But instead, he had just walked into a trap of his own making. I handed him the papers, my hand steady despite the anger that burned low in my stomach. "Sign these," I said simply. He took the papers, flipping through them, his eyes narrowed as he read the terms. He started to ask questions, a protest, a defensive shift, but I wasn't listening. There was no need to explain myself. This wasn't about words anymore. The house was already mine. I didn't need to explain anything. As Craig signed, I could see it in his face. The moment he realized he wasn't getting what he thought he wasn't inheriting anything except perhaps the mess he'd left behind. After the papers were signed, I turned and walked out of the office. No one followed, no one had to. I drove back to the house in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel. When I pulled into the driveway, I paused, letting the weight of the moment wash over me. The house stood there unchanged but not the same. It was mine again, no speech, no grand gesture, no apology. I walked through the front door, the one I hadn't stepped through in years. The smell of the wood, the familiar creak of the stairs, the warmth of memories long buried, it all welcomed me back like nothing had ever changed. It hadn't. And that was enough. I didn't cook for them, not tonight, not ever again. Instead, I set the table for two, just Carla and me. It wasn't much, a simple meal, but it was enough. The kitchen had a way of quieting everything, of reminding me that I had once filled this space with laughter, with noise. I never thought I'd have a peaceful dinner here again, not after all the years of doing it for them. Carla arrived just after 6. She didn't need to knock, she had a key, as always. She knew my habits, my moods, and when I needed her to sit silently at the table with me, no questions asked. She took the seat across from me and raised her wine glass. "To the house," she said, and I smiled thinly. It wasn't a celebration, not really, not yet. The silence that followed was thick but not uncomfortable. It was a silence that came with understanding, with years of knowing each other without speaking. I couldn't help but glance at the empty chairs where my family used to sit, Craig, Melissa, Emily. I'd spent so many years setting those places, wondering what they would talk about, what they'd leave behind in the corner of my kitchen. But tonight there was no ache, not anymore. I stared at the empty seats and felt only the hollow relief of having reclaimed what was mine. There was no bitterness in me, no sorrow, just quiet, the way the house felt when I first moved in, when I thought everything could last forever. The phone buzzed in my pocket, cutting through the stillness. Emily's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring, but it buzzed again. Carla raised an eyebrow. "Answer it," she said softly. I hesitated, but then I swiped the screen. "Grandma, why didn't you tell me?" Emily's voice was a mix of concern and confusion. I didn't need to ask what she meant. She'd seen the news. She'd heard what happened, the for sale sign in the yard, her parents' victory, their idea of victory. I exhaled slowly. Would they have let me? I asked. The question hung in the air. Would they? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I didn't know. "Would it have changed anything if you did?" I asked softly, but I knew the answer already. It wouldn't have. "I didn't want you to feel left out," Emily said quietly, "but I didn't think it would be like this." "Neither did I whispered, looking at the empty chairs once more. The line went silent again and I ended the call. I didn't have to say anything else. Emily was caught in the middle just like she always had been. Carla watched me as I set the phone down. "You did the right thing," she said, her voice steady. "You didn't ask for this, you didn't bring it on yourself." I nodded. Carla didn't need to say more. I could see in her eyes that she understood. But then the email arrived and it hit like a slap. Melissa's name at the top, no subject, just words that cut to the core. "You're embarrassing yourself. The house is no longer yours. You're making this a spectacle. Don't make things worse, just let it go." I stared at the message for a long time. Melissa had always been good at getting under my skin, but this was something different. The coldness, the dismissiveness, it was final, like a door slammed shut in my face. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything I'd lost. Not just the house, not just the family, but the hope that maybe, just maybe, they would come to their senses, that they would remember what we had. But they hadn't, and I had no intention of waiting for them to. "Let's write," I said suddenly, pushing away the email. Carla looked at me, her eyebrows raised, but I just started to pull out a notepad from the drawer. "Let's record it, all of it." Carla tilted her head, not quite understanding. "You're not writing to remember," she said, her voice soft. "You're writing to record, to make sure you never forget what they took from you." And so I began. Slowly, methodically, I started writing. Each word came with a weight, painful, clear, necessary. Memories, facts, the times I thought they'd finally see me, the moments I'd given up for them thinking it would matter. I wrote until the page was full. Until the ink bled into the paper, until I could feel the weight of every memory sitting between the lines. Carla sat quietly as I finished, her wine glass empty. She didn't say a word, but I knew she was there. When I finally looked up, I felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't just a record of what had happened, it was proof. Proof that I had never been the one who gave up. I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding onto until I started packing up the old photos. The heirlooms, the ones that had been kept in the attic in boxes beneath layers of old blankets and memories, each of them a piece of something I thought I couldn't live without. It was all too much. The dishes, the framed portraits, the wedding albums I had arranged so meticulously, all those things that were supposed to be passed down, that were supposed to carry us forward. But I wasn't giving them to Craig or Melissa, not anymore. I sorted through the boxes on my own without an ounce of guilt. Craig and Melissa had made their move. They tried to erase me from everything. Now I would erase them from the life I had built. They didn't deserve these things. The silverware was the first to go, the set my mother had passed down to me. Carla helped me load it all into boxes for the women's shelter, the one in town that I had supported for years without them ever knowing. The same shelter where I'd once donated my time, my effort, my quiet contributions. I spent hours carefully wrapping everything, the wedding china, the crystal, the old photo albums. But as I packed, I found myself slipping some of the more personal items into the donation boxes, items that didn't belong to Craig or Melissa, and certainly not Emily. By the time I was finished, the shelves looked bare. The living room felt quieter than it ever had, and yet there was a strange comfort in it. This was mine again. These things, these memories, they didn't belong in the hands of opportunists. The first message came from Melissa. "Those were supposed to be for Emily," it read, blunt and furious. "You're making a spectacle of yourself. She deserves those things, not a charity." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I knew what she wanted. She wanted me to fold, to give in. She wanted me to hand over my life to her, but I wasn't going to do it. "She can come get what she wants, without you." I hit send, and the words felt heavier than the weight of everything I'd given away. Carla, as always, stood by without saying a word. She had seen me through so many things, both big and small. She knew I didn't need advice, not this time. I was done apologizing for what was mine. A few days later, Emily came by, unannounced. She didn't knock, she just let herself in like she used to, hesitating in the doorway. I stood there, watching her, the girl who used to run into my arms, the one who'd whispered her secrets to me. She had her head down, her shoulders hunched like she was carrying something heavy. "You came," I said, the words thick in my throat. Emily didn't speak. She simply walked over to me and wrapped her arms around me tightly, her face pressing into my shoulder. I stood there holding her and felt the years of strained silence between us fade for a brief moment. When she pulled away, she didn't say much. She only looked at the shelves, the empty spaces where family heirlooms used to stand. She didn't ask for anything, not directly, but she walked toward the box of photos I had set aside. Emily picked up a single framed photo of the two of us, taken the last Christmas we spent in this house together. Her fingers traced the edge of the frame for a long moment before she spoke. "Can I take this?" she asked, her voice low. I nodded, and she gently placed the photo in the bag she had brought with her. After a moment, she walked over to the cookbook shelf and picked up an old one, the one I had written my own recipes in years ago. "I'll take this too," she whispered, holding it close. I didn't stop. She was holding on to something just like I had been. "I'll bring them back, Grandma," she said, but I knew that wasn't true. These things were hers now. When Emily left, I felt something settle inside me, something heavy, something that had been holding me in place for too long. Later that night, Carla helped me set up a living trust, one that would make sure everything went where it belonged, with the right people. The house, everything inside it, it was all going elsewhere, to people who understood what it meant, people who didn't come to take but to give. "I'm not writing a will," I said as I signed the papers. "I'm writing my freedom." Carla smiled, her hand resting gently on mine. "Freedom doesn't come cheap, Helen." I looked at her and nodded. I knew what I had lost, but I also knew what I had gained. And that was enough. Victor's voice was steady on the phone. "Let them try," he said, the words clipped and confident. "They'll lose and they'll pay for your fees." That was exactly what I needed to hear. For so long, I'd been carrying the weight of the fight alone, but now I wasn't alone anymore. I had someone on my side who wasn't afraid of the mess Craig and Melissa had made, someone who believed I could win. The next few days were a blur of paperwork and late nights. Victor had me pull everything together, every email, every text, every journal entry documenting years of exclusion. The proof was there. They couldn't deny it anymore. Craig and Melissa had tried to erase me from the family, from my own life. I sifted through the documents, reading over the group messages, the ones where I'd been left out of everything. No birthday wishes, no invites to holidays. I had kept track of all of it carefully, quietly. It hurt to read, but it was the truth. I'd always known deep down that they weren't just after my house. They wanted control. They had used me, ignored me, and then tried to sweep me aside. The house was just the final piece of the puzzle. Victor wasn't just handling the legal work, he was giving me my dignity back. "You're not just fighting for property," he told me one night. "You're fighting for everything they've tried to take from you, your place, your voice." The words sank in. He was right. This wasn't just about bricks and mortar, it was about reclaiming my life. He worked fast, preparing an irrevocable trust to bypass Craig entirely. I couldn't risk them finding another way in. The house was mine, but this document would make it official. I wasn't leaving anything up to chance. The trust would ensure that Craig and Melissa couldn't touch the property, and it would protect what little I had left of my future. It was final. It was mine. When Carla came over to review everything, I could see the pride in her eyes. "You've rewritten more than just your will," she said quietly, scanning the trust papers. "You've rewritten the ending." I smiled, but the weight of her words hung heavy. It was true. I had taken control of my own story. It wasn't just about fighting for the house anymore. It was about fighting for myself. That evening, I sat with Emily, showing her the trust I had set up. She was quiet as she read through the details, her eyes scanning the words with a seriousness I hadn't expected. When she looked up at me, there was something in her gaze, understanding, but also a deep sadness. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied, squeezing her hand. "I've done what I needed to." I knew Emily didn't fully understand the years of hurt, the manipulation, but she was beginning to see the truth. The next day, a message from Melissa arrived. It was brief, harsh. Elder abuse is real. Do your research. The signs are everywhere. I stared at the words, feeling the familiar sting of her cruelty, but this time it didn't hurt as much. I was prepared. I set the phone down and turned to Victor's words. You're shielded. They can try all they want, but they'll lose. And for the first time in years, I felt confident. I had already won. I hadn't expected Craig today, but I wasn't surprised when he showed up. He pulled up in his usual beat-up SUV, the engine grumbling like it was struggling to keep up with him. He stopped at the gate, eyes darting between me and the house. I stood there, unmoving, waiting. I had been prepared for this moment. You wanted it, I said, my voice calm. Now visit like a guest. He didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the car, rubbing a hand through his hair. He looked at me like he was searching for an excuse, a way back in. This is ridiculous, Mom, he muttered. You're punishing us. I raised an eyebrow. You punished me, I replied, keeping my tone steady. For years. He faltered, mouth opening and closing like he was trying to find the right words. His jaw tightened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of guilt buried under his anger, under the weight of years of avoidance. You don't have to do this, he said, stepping forward, his hand reaching for the gate, but I moved to block him and he hesitated. He didn't know how to handle this. I stood firm, not giving him an inch. Just open the gate, he tried again, softer this time, his voice pleading. It's not too late, Helen. No, I said, my voice sharp now. It's too late for you. He looked at me, then at the house, and his eyes flicked to the papers I was holding. What is this? He asked, his voice unsure. A legal document, I said, handing him the papers. A clause. I've barred you and Melissa from the property. His face twisted, disbelief crossing his features. You're serious? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was in the papers. For a moment, Craig didn't move, standing frozen in front of me. His eyes were locked on the documents, his hands trembling slightly as he held them. Then he looked up at me, his voice hoarse. You can't do this. I already have, I said, my voice unwavering. Behind him, I saw Emily sitting in the passenger seat of the car, her face visible through the cracked window. Her eyes were wide, her posture stiff. She didn't know what to do, caught between the two of us just like always. I turned away from Craig and looked at her, our eyes meeting. I didn't have to say anything. She knew. She had always known. She had always felt the divide between us, the unspoken tension that had grown over the years. I could feel her discomfort, but I also saw something in her eyes, a quiet understanding, a quiet apology. Craig was still standing there, paper in hand, but the words were gone. He couldn't even argue anymore. He just looked lost. I didn't wait for him to speak again. I turned to Emily and opened my arms. She hesitated before stepping out of the car and walking toward me slowly. She didn't say a word as I pulled her into a hug, holding her tight as if the years of separation, the pain, could somehow be erased in that one embrace. I don't want to be in the middle anymore, she whispered, voice barely audible. I didn't know it was this bad. I held her close, feeling her confusion and her sorrow. You never asked for this, I whispered back, but you don't have to choose sides anymore. I could hear Craig muttering behind me, trying to explain, but I didn't. Turn around, his words didn't matter anymore. The damage had been done. And then, at the end of the driveway, there she was, Melissa, arms crossed, standing in the shadows of the streetlight, watching, waiting. She didn't step forward, just stood there, silent and cold. You think you've won, she called out, her voice sharp, cutting through the air. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She pulled out her phone, a smile on her lips as she typed. Family drama, she muttered. Everyone should know what you've done. I stood my ground, unshaken. Let her in, I said, turning back to Craig. She'll get the full story, all of it, with receipts. The story began quietly. A local reporter called, asking if I would be willing to share my side of things. I had no idea it would grow into something bigger, something that would reach places I never expected. But that's the thing about truth. It has a way of spreading, no matter how hard you try to keep it hidden. At first, it was just a small article in the local news. The headline was simple enough. Helen Mayer, 71, fights for her home after years of estrangement from her son and daughter-in-law. The reporter barely needed to dig. The story had always been right there in plain sight if anyone bothered to look. And look they did. Soon, family estrangement forums were buzzing with my name. It felt strange, like I had been dropped into a world I didn't quite belong to. The messages and emails started pouring in. People I had never met shared their own stories of abandonment, betrayal, and silence. The words "I see you, Helen" appeared again and again like a comforting blanket I hadn't realized I needed. It didn't feel like a victory, not exactly. It felt real. For the first time, I wasn't alone in my pain. People were hearing me, seeing me, and for someone who had spent years in the shadows, that felt like a small kind of freedom. Then came the podcast request, a show called Holiday Orphans dedicated to telling the stories of people who had been cast aside by their families like me. The host's voice was calm, understanding. She asked me questions I'd never quite had the courage to answer before, questions that made me think about what I'd lost and what I had gained. "I want to know how it feels," she said, "to be discarded, especially at your age." Her voice was kind, not prying, but I still hesitated. Could I really say the words out loud? Could I speak to an audience who would hear my pain, see my loss? But then I thought of all the years I'd spent in silence, in hiding. "Sure," I finally said, "I'll do it." When the episode aired, I didn't expect much, just another conversation, another voice in the crowd, but it was different. People listened. They heard me, really heard me, and for the first time in years I felt like I was finally seen. That evening, Emily messaged me. "It's all true, isn't it?" she asked. The words felt like a quiet, lingering echo in my mind. She had heard it. She had heard my story, my side, and for the first time she was beginning to understand. "Yes," I typed, my fingers hesitating as they hovered over the screen, but not all of it was fair, just real. I wasn't sure if she truly understood the weight of those words, but it was a start. It was something. Before I could think much further, another message arrived, this time from Melissa, a voicemail. My heart tightened as I hit play. "You're tearing this family apart, Helen," she spat. "This public spectacle, it's humiliating for you, for me, for everyone. You've gone too far, you're the problem." I let the words hang in the air for a moment. Her venom was familiar, the same manipulative tone she'd always used, but I didn't need to reply. There was nothing left to say. I set the phone down, feeling the weight of everything I had carried for so long. But now there was freedom. The truth was out there, and no matter how hard they tried to control the narrative, the story was mine now. Victor called shortly after, his voice a steady reassurance. "Helen, I've reviewed everything. Your documents are airtight. Legally, you're shielded. They can try all they want, but they'll lose." For a moment, I let myself breathe, but it wasn't about winning. It was about what I had already claimed: my life, my house, my truth. The story was no longer just mine. It belonged to anyone who had been silenced, and I wasn't going to be silent anymore. The house was quieter than it had been in years, but it felt fuller. The long tables were set with mismatched china and vintage silverware. There was no grandeur to the meal, no need to impress. It was about the people who had stuck by me, the ones who hadn't forgotten. Carla arrived first, as usual, carrying a basket of warm bread. The smell of rosemary filled the room as she set it down with a smile. "Looks like someone's been busy," she teased, eyeing the spread I'd prepared. Nothing extravagant, just enough to fill us. "I wanted it to be real," I said, arranging roasted vegetables on the counter. The guests trickled in, a mix of old neighbors and close friends who'd stayed in touch over the years when Craig and Melissa hadn't. These were the people who saw me for who I really was, beyond the role of mother or grandmother, a woman holding onto her dignity. I had invited Emily, of course. I knew it wouldn't be easy for her. She still felt the pull of her parents' expectations, but I hoped she could find comfort here. When she arrived, she stood at the doorway for a long moment, taking in the table, the faces. She looked unsure, like she didn't belong. I could see the conflict in her, the same look she'd always worn when caught between two worlds. "Everything okay?" I asked softly. "It's just strange," Emily admitted, settling beside me, her fingers brushing the tablecloth. "I've never really seen anything like this." I nodded, understanding. It's okay to feel a little lost. We're all learning how to find our way again. The meal unfolded, and I felt a sense of calm. These were people who understood the weight of history, of family, and the importance of the present. There were no expectations, no pretense, just honest conversation, laughter, and comfort. After the meal, once the plates had been cleared and the conversation quieted, Carla pulled out her disposable camera, insistent on capturing the moment. "Something about printed pictures feels more permanent," she said, her eyes twinkling. She snapped a few shots of the table, of everyone chatting, laughing softly. Then she pointed the camera at Emily and me. I didn't hesitate. We smiled, no forced poses, just the way things were, real. The next morning, I picked up the photos from the drugstore, a small stack, the film still warm from processing. I framed the best one, a picture of Carla, Emily, and the neighbors all gathered around the table. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I placed the photo above the fireplace where the old family portrait used to hang, the one with Craig, Melissa, and Emily, their smiles frozen in time. The old photo had been a lie. It represented everything they had tried to take, everything I had been erased from. This new photo, this one was mine. Just as I set the frame in place, I saw Craig's SUV drive slowly by the house. Melissa was beside him, eyes peering through the window. They didn't stop, they just watched, judging. I didn't flinch, I didn't look away. I could feel Emily beside me, her voice a quiet whisper. "This feels more like family than anything we had." I didn't need to answer. The truth hung between us, clear and unspoken. The old portrait was gone, replaced by something real. This was what family meant now, and nothing, not even their passing gaze, could take that away from me. The courtroom felt unfamiliar, sterile. The air was thick with the smell of paper, the sound of distant conversations. I sat there still, my hands folded in my lap, a quiet determination settling over me. Victor was beside me, his legal pad in hand, his eyes scanning the documents one last time. We had done everything we could. The case was airtight. Every journal entry I'd written, every email, every message in the family group chats was there, proof of the years I had been ignored, sidelined, erased from my own family. Craig and Melissa couldn't deny it anymore. They had tried to push me out, but I had kept track. I had kept my silence, yes, but it wasn't a silence born of acquiescence. It was survival. The case was straightforward. A mother, a grandmother, excluded from every family event, forgotten, and now, after years of manipulation and neglect, her son and daughter-in-law tried to claim what was rightfully hers. The judge's eyes were on me as he motioned for me to speak. I stood slowly, taking in the weight of the room. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "They didn't just leave me out," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the tension. "They trained my silence." The words felt strange on my tongue, but they were true. I had been silent, yes, but only because I had been taught to be. They had trained me to accept being left behind. It was the way they controlled me, the way they kept me in a box, ignored me for years. The judge nodded, acknowledging the depth of the statement. I could see it in his eyes, the understanding. It wasn't just about legalities. It was about the years of emotional manipulation that had taken place unseen by the world. Melissa took her turn next. She was ready for this, prepared to play her role. She stood, her voice trembling with feigned emotion, her tears coming on cue. "She's lying," she said, almost too theatrically. "She's made this up. We've tried, we've done everything we could, but she won't accept that things change." Her performance, though, didn't land. The judge wasn't moved. His expression was unreadable. Melissa faltered, her shoulders tensing as her voice cracked, but no one was buying it. Not a. "Naimor." When Emily's affidavit was read aloud, the room went silent. She had written that, no matter what had happened, I had always been there for her, that I had never truly been absent, even though they had stopped looking for me. She was always there, we just stopped looking. The words hit like a quiet thunderclap. I glanced over at Emily, sitting beside me, her face a mix of regret and understanding. She had finally seen it, seen me, and in that moment I felt something shift between us, something that had been broken for so long. The judge reviewed everything, the evidence, the testimonies, the documents that had been carefully gathered. Then, with a final glance at the room, he spoke. "The court rules in favor of Mrs. Mayer. Total control of assets remains with her. The petition is dismissed." It was over, the house, the possessions, the legacy all remained with me. I had fought for this quietly, patiently, and I had won. Melissa stormed out of the courtroom, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Craig didn't look at me. He didn't meet my eyes as he filed out behind her, his head lowered like the weight of everything he had done was finally too much. The victory wasn't sweet, it wasn't celebratory, but it was final. I had reclaimed my place, my dignity, and my future. As I stood there, the weight of everything I had lost and gained sinking in, I felt something else, something that had been missing for so long. I was free. I didn't hesitate as I stood at the county clerk's desk, the papers neatly arranged before me. The house that had once been Craig's inheritance, the one they had tried to take from me, was now mine in a way that went beyond legality. It was mine because I had fought for it, and now I was making it official. The clerk barely looked up as I slid the amendment across the counter. She stamped it with a practiced hand, and in that moment I felt something shift. It was small, but it was enough. Craig's name was officially removed from the title. His claim to the house was gone. I didn't want to look back at it anymore. I didn't want to dwell on the past, the family that had cast me aside, the son who had abandoned me. Instead, I was focused on the future, my future. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady, the weight of the moment sinking in. I left the clerk's office, my hands clutching the fresh document. I didn't drive straight home. Instead, I stopped by the local bank to meet with Carla. We sat in a small room while I signed the final paperwork for the Mayer Women's Endowment. The house would go to a women's shelter, one that I had worked with for years, where women who had nowhere else to turn could find refuge, safety, and a place to rebuild. I'd spent so many years pouring my energy into caring for others, but now, with the house secured, I wanted to leave a legacy that would make a difference long after I was gone. A legacy for women like me, women who had been silenced, erased, or abandoned. "You've rewritten more than just your will," Carla said as she read over the trust fund documents. "You rewrote the ending." I smiled, but it was a bittersweet smile. I'm just getting started. Later that day, I sat in front of the fireplace, the flames dancing softly as they licked at the wood. I had been thinking about the old family Christmas photo, the one that had once hung in the living room, filled with smiles that had never quite felt real. I pulled it from the box, the edges frayed with age. The photo had always been a symbol of everything that had been taken from me, of all the years spent pretending I mattered, pretending I was a part of something that, in the end, wasn't mine. There was a moment as I stared at it when I thought about putting it away in a drawer, letting it fade into memory, but instead I stood, carrying it to the fireplace. As the flames caught the edges of the photo, it curled up, the faces of my family, Craig, Melissa, and Emily, distorting in the heat. The picture burned faster than I had expected, the last remnants of my past turning to ash. I let it burn, I watched it crumble into nothing. But as the photo disintegrated, a small piece of paper fell from the back of the frame. It was a note written in faded ink by my husband, his handwriting recognizable even after all these years. "This house belongs to Helen, forever." The words felt like a quiet echo. I hadn't needed the reminder, I had known this all along. But it was a gift, nonetheless, the final confirmation that I had always been the one who mattered, that this house, this life, was mine. I reached down, holding the paper gently in my hands, and tucked it away in my pocket. The past was gone, but the truth was still with me. I looked over at the empty hearth, the ashes of my old life fading. I was no longer tied to the ghosts of what had been. The future was mine to shape, and I would shape it on my terms. It had been 10 years since I last decorated for Christmas. 10 years wondering if it was worth it, the effort, the hope, the tradition, when I was always left out. But this year was different. The house was mine again, and I would make it my holiday. The lights went up on the tree just like they had every year before. The garland twisted along the railings, the glass ornaments I'd collected over decades hung carefully, each one a memory. It wasn't about making everything perfect. It was about making it mine. The smell of pine filled the air as I placed the final ornament on the tree. I stepped back and took in the scene, the glow from the fireplace, the flickering candles on the mantel, the table set for a meal. I hadn't hosted a Christmas dinner in so long. Carla arrived first, carrying a basket of warm bread, the scent of rosemary spilling from it. "I thought this place could use something fresh," she said, setting the bread on the table. "You're right," I said, smiling. "It's been too long." The other guests trickled in, veterans who didn't have family, college students who hadn't been able to go home, a few neighbors who I'd known for years. I filled their plates with roasted vegetables and turkey, and we sat down together like a family that had been pieced together, carefully and with intention. Emily came later. She had seemed hesitant when I first invited her, but she came. She walked in like a ghost from the past, her eyes glancing around, unsure. But when she saw me, something shifted. Her shoulders relaxed and she smiled. We didn't need words. It had been so long since we had shared a moment like this. But tonight there were no tensions, no silent expectations, just a dinner, just us. After the meal, when the plates had been cleared and the conversation had quieted, Emily walked over to the old piano, the one I had taught her on all those years ago. She hesitated for a moment, and then her fingers found the keys. The familiar melody of a Christmas carol floated through the room, her voice joining in, soft and steady. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me. It was a song I'd heard so many times before, but this time it felt different. It felt like the beginning of something new. Then, a sound from outside, the soft hum of an engine idling. I stood and walked toward the window, my heart sinking as I saw Melissa's car parked at the curb. She wasn't moving, just sitting there, staring at the house. For a second, I considered going out, confronting her, but I didn't need her approval. I didn't need them. I turned away from the window and walked back to the table, my feet steady. Craig's text buzzed on my phone, a ping that almost felt too loud in the quiet of the room. "We'd like to come in." I stared at it. For a moment, a part of me wanted to reply, to let them in, to show them what they'd missed, what they had discarded. But then I remembered, this was my moment. I deleted the text without responding. Carla was watching me from across the room, her smile knowing. "You bought more than a house," she said softly. "You bought back your dignity." I smiled back at her, the warmth of her words sinking into me. She was right. This wasn't just about a house or a holiday dinner. It was about claiming what was always mine. The fire crackled in the hearth, and Emily, still sitting by the piano, glanced up at me, a quiet understanding between us. This was what it felt like to truly be home again. And for the first time in years, I felt peace, not because they weren't there, but because I finally was. The letter had sat unopened for days. My husband's handwriting was familiar, the slant of the letters, the way his words always felt like a quiet reassurance. But this letter, tucked away in the back of my drawer, felt different. It wasn't just a note. It was a reminder of everything I had fought for. I held the letter in my hands now, the paper worn but sturdy. My fingers traced the words, and I could almost hear his voice in the silence of the room. "Helen, if you're reading this, then you already know what they've done, what they will do. You've always been strong, but you need to be smart. Keep this letter. It's your path back to what is yours." The letter confirmed everything I already knew. My husband had seen this coming. He knew the family would turn, that Craig and Melissa would do whatever they could to claim the house. He had left me instructions, detailed and careful, on how to reclaim the title when the time came. "This house belongs to you, Helen, and when they try to take it, you'll have everything you need to take it back." A small chuckle escaped me. He'd always been one step ahead of everyone, and now I was finally standing in the place he had promised would always be mine. I stood up, the letter still in my hand, and walked toward the fire. The flames crackled as they licked at the logs, a soft heat filling the room. With a deep breath, I threw the letter into the fire. The paper curled as the flames caught, turning it to ash. I didn't need roof anymore. The house was mine. I had already won. I walked through the house, each step solid, purposeful. The walls that I had painted years ago, the floors that I had polished, now felt like they were truly mine again. The house, once a symbol of loss, now stood as a testament to everything I had reclaimed. My fingers brushed against the banister, the smooth wood warm beneath my touch. I walked into the kitchen, my eyes landing on the place where we used to sit, Craig, Melissa, Emily, all gathered around the table. That life, that family was gone, and this new life, the one I had built for myself, was here. I stopped in front of the drawer where I kept the remnants of my old life, receipts, memories, the things that had once been used against me. With a steady hand, I pulled out a piece of paper and wrote a simple note. This house is not a legacy, it's a warning. I placed it carefully in the drawer, the ink drying slowly as though the words were sealing something in time. I didn't need to leave a legacy for them. What I had created was mine alone. Later that evening, as the fire flickered softly in the hearth, I sat across from Carla. Her face, bathed in the soft light, reflected the same understanding I had felt for so long. We clinked our glasses together, the cider sweet on my tongue. The warmth of the drink filled the space between us, but there was no need for words. "I've been waiting for this," Carla said, her voice a steady, quiet strength. "No regrets?" I asked, my gaze fixed on the dancing flames. She shook her head, her smile soft and knowing. "Not a single one." We sat in silence for a while, the crackle of the fire our only company. The house had changed. I had changed. And in that stillness, I finally understood what it meant to be free. They had left me out of every holiday for years, so I bought the house they wanted, and I never opened the door to them again.